The morning rush had begun the way it always did, coffee brewing, plates clattering, and conversation spilling from every corner booth. Claire moved between tables with practiced ease, balancing trays, refilling mugs, offering smiles that came as naturally as breathing. Amid all the noise and bustle, there was one constant she could count on: the quiet man by the window. He was always there before the sun climbed too high, sliding into the same booth with his cap pulled low and his jacket zipped all the way up, no matter the weather. He never needed a menu. Coffee, 2 eggs, toast, he would say in that low, gravelly voice, eyes never leaving the view outside. She wondered what he saw out there, staring across the highway as trucks roared past, as if his mind was anchored somewhere far beyond the glass. He wasn't like the other customers who filled the room with chatter. He didn't complain if the eggs were overdone or if she forgot the butter. He simply ate in silence, folded his napkin neatly, and tucked the bill under the rim of the plate with exact precision. Sometimes she would slip him an extra slice of pie, pretending it was a mistake. He never refused, but his only response was the faintest nod, the corners of his lips twitching in what might have been a smile. To anyone else, he was just another customer. To Claire, he became part of the rhythm of her days, a steady beat in a world that was always changing. She caught herself watching him sometimes. The way his hands trembled slightly when he lifted his cup. The way he sat straight-backed, posture too rigid to be casual, like a man who had once lived by rules he couldn't forget. She wondered if he had family, if someone waited for him when he left the diner, or if the empty seat across from him told the truth she didn't want to admit. He spoke so little, yet his silence was never cold. It carried weight, as though every word he didn't say had already been carved into him long ago. 3 years passed like this, one quiet morning after another. Claire never asked his name, and he never offered it. Their conversations lived in small gestures, the way she poured his coffee before he asked, the way he left his tip folded with military sharpness. And though he gave her nothing more than a quiet nod in return, she felt, deep down, that he noticed her in the same way she noticed him. Little of it. People missed days sometimes, bad weather, an appointment, maybe just the need to sleep in. She still glanced at the door every time it opened, half expecting to see his familiar jacket, his quiet shuffle to the booth by the window. By the second day, she was carrying an extra mug in her hand before realizing she had no one to set it in front of. She laughed it off to the cook in the back, but it left her unsettled. By the end of the week, the emptiness of his booth gnawed at her. She found herself pausing during her rounds, cloth in hand, wiping the spotless table again and again as though he might suddenly appear if she just kept it ready. The mornings felt incomplete without his silent nod, without the comfort of someone she could count on to be there. The chatter of truckers and families rang louder, almost irritating, because it wasn't balanced by the steady stillness he used to bring with him. Claire began asking quietly around town. The hardware store clerk shrugged, the sheriff only shook his head. "Quiet fella," he said. Kept to himself. That was the most anyone had to offer. No one seemed to know where he lived, whether he had friends or family nearby. It startled her, realizing how a man could sit in her diner nearly every day for 3 years and still be a stranger to everyone. A ghost in plain sight. Weeks rolled by, and the booth gathered a film of dust, as though the world itself was erasing him. Some mornings, she caught herself cracking eggs for an extra plate, stopping mid-motion when she remembered. Other mornings, she would carry a slice of pie to the counter before shaking her head and sliding it back into the case. The small rituals they had shared, so ordinary, so wordless, now felt like tiny holes punched through her routine. Sometimes, late in the afternoon when business slowed, she sat at the booth herself. From his spot, she saw the road through the glass, endless trucks rushing past, their engines groaning like a tide that never turned. She wondered if that was what he had been staring at all those mornings: movement, departure, lives rushing forward while he stayed still. The emptiness across from her confirmed what she feared: he had been alone. And now, he was gone, without goodbye, without explanation, leaving only the ache of a silence that grew heavier with each passing day. Snow pressed against the windows in slow, heavy flakes the morning the diner's bell rang and 6 men walked in together. Their boots thudded against the tile in perfect rhythm, their shoulders squared, their presence cutting through the casual noise of the breakfast crowd. Conversations faltered, forks paused mid-air, even the cook in the back peeked out from the pass-through window. These weren't just travelers passing through, they carried themselves with the kind of discipline that didn't fade once uniforms came off. Claire noticed immediately. She had seen truckers, farmers, factory crews, even bikers pile in before, but this was different. These men moved with unspoken order, their eyes scanning the room out of habit more than curiosity. They didn't look tired from travel. They looked purposeful, like men arriving to fulfill something solemn. She smoothed her apron nervously as they chose a table near the counter. One of them, taller than the rest with sharp eyes and a trimmed beard, stood once she approached. His voice was calm, steady, but carried weight. "Ma'am, are you Claire?" The use of her name startled her. She blinked, tray clutched tight against her chest, and nodded slowly. A glance passed between the men, something silent and heavy, before he reached into his pack and pulled out a weathered wooden box. He set it on the counter with deliberate care, as though the contents were fragile, sacred. Her heart skipped. "What is this?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. The man's jaw tightened before he spoke. "The quiet gentleman who used to sit by that window, he was one of us. A Navy SEAL. He told us about you. Said you were kind to him when no one else was." The words pressed against her like a weight she didn't know she could carry. Claire's hands trembled as she touched the box. The chatter around the diner had faded completely now. All eyes seemed to rest on her, though the room felt like it had shrunk to only herself and these 6 men. She swallowed, emotions welling as realization dawned. He hadn't just been a lonely stranger passing through. He had been a soldier, a man with a story locked deep inside, one he had chosen not to share until now, through them. The tall man gave a slight nod, his voice softer this time. "He wanted you to have what he left behind." Claire's fingers hovered over the box as if opening it too quickly might shatter the fragile link it represented. Her throat tightened, her breath shallow, and for a moment she wasn't sure she had the strength to lift the lid. But the 6 men stood quietly behind her, their presence steady and protective, as though they had carried this moment across miles to place it gently in her hands. With a trembling breath, she eased the lid open. Inside lay a neatly folded flag, its deep blue fabric dotted with white stars, pressed with the same military precision she had seen in the way he folded his napkin, the way he tucked his tip under the plate. Beneath it rested a tarnished service medal, its edges worn by time but still gleaming faintly in the diner's light. Next to it, a faded photograph showed a group of young men in uniform, arms slung across one another's shoulders, faces fierce with determination. Claire's eyes searched the faces until she found him, years younger, standing tall, his gaze direct, his presence commanding even in the captured stillness of a photo. But it was the folded paper beneath the medal that made her breath catch. She unfolded it carefully, the pen strokes firm and deliberate, like every word was chosen with care. The note was short, yet it carried the weight of all he had never spoken aloud, for the kind waitress who reminded me life still had warmth. "Thank you." Tears blurred her vision. She pressed the note to her chest, the words sinking deeper than any long speech ever could. For 3 years, she had thought she was simply serving a quiet customer, offering pie and coffee to fill a silence. She had never imagined that, in her small gestures, she had touched the life of a man who had carried both honor and loneliness like heavy armor. When she looked up, the 6 SEALs were standing in a line, their heads bowed, hats clasped in their hands. The diner was hushed. Even the regulars who usually filled the air with chatter sat frozen, reverent. The tall man spoke softly, almost like a prayer. "He wanted you to know you mattered." Claire's tears spilled freely then, though she smiled through them. She turned to the booth by the window, where the snow outside drifted down like ash, and for the first time since his absence, it no longer felt empty. It felt consecrated, marked by memory, by sacrifice, by gratitude. She knew she would keep the flag, the medal, the photo, and the note close, but the greatest gift he had left behind was invisible, the reminder that even the quietest lives could speak volumes, if only someone cared enough to listen.